Hi, Paul. It's really great to be able to chat to you today. Thanks so much for your time. I know you are the founder of Landlord Action. You're also the Chief Operations Officer of Hamilton Fraser, and of course you appear on Channel 5's Nightmare Tenants and Slum Landlords, which I've watched many times and enjoy watching. It can be quite stressful watching it, but I think it really does highlight a lot of the issues that we have to deal with as landlords. And you and I are really big advocates of how landlords need to be much more professional. We really need to think of our businesses as a business, because that's what they are. And we're seeing the government sort of push that on us anyway with more legislation and compliance and so on. What's the sort of feedback that you're hearing about?
So, yeah, I mean, look, the private rental sector has doubled in the last 10, 12 years now. We're up to 20% of the housing market is the private rental sector. Literally, if you look at COVID, maybe a year before COVID, the last 3 years have seen some of the biggest changes in the private rental sector.
Yeah.
The biggest change coming in will be in the next 2 to 3 years will be the Renters Reform Bill that's at a white paper stage, which is due out maybe third quarter of this year, which is the abolishment of Section 21. We're talking about lifetime deposits. We're talking about landlord redress, which we're doing a pilot scheme with one of our brands, the property redress scheme, which is the redress scheme for letting agents. And also they're talking about landlord registration. As an organizer, then obviously naturally COVID came in March 2020. There was 47 changes in England, Scotland and Wales due to the COVID. And the biggest challenge for landlords is legislation. Effectively, yes, of course, there's taxes, Section 24. But of course, in the midst of COVID, we saw the housing market set up, and we got lucky as an industry in the middle part of May, which and it effectively showed it underpinned the economy. And then, of course, you had the massive support of furloughing. You had 6 million people on universal credit. And then, of course, there was the housing frenzy where people were selling properties for the maximum. And we are seeing a lot of landlords at Landlord Action that are serving notice and they want to cash in their chips. They've been in the game a long time. They've made a lot of money out of their equity and really self-management. I mean, I've got a website, paulshamplina.tv, and I did an online course. I did it right, I think it was maybe April 2020, early on. And I debated with two corporate landlords and a letting agent, self-manage or not to self-manage. Yeah. And landlords really need to take the view now because, 85% of landlords have full-time jobs. Yeah. And, are they up and do they have the ability and the tools? And I understand with regard to, your software, and there's a lot of softwares out there, so to assess the landlord, to make sure that they are compliant. Yeah. Making sure they've dealt with things when they should be dealing with things, because of course we have an issue with enforcement and there is a lack of resource and there's a lot of inconsistency in a lot of councils, but landlords can get fined and they get fined a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the similar feedback we're getting. We're seeing that a lot of the smaller landlords are actually dropping out of the market, but actually the bigger landlords and the more professional ones are actually expanding their portfolio. Yes. Because there is a great opportunity out there, and that's what we're seeing, and that's why systems are so important. Our landlords are telling us that they're saving at least 50% of their time using Alphaletz. They need to be more automated because you're quite right. A lot of them have full-time jobs as well, so that's really important. And of course, people want to save money. Everyone's looking that they're being pushed to spend more money on compliance and all these extra charges. So if there's a system out there that can help people save money and get more organized and spend more time expanding their portfolios, then actually that's the route forward. But they're all really good points you made. I mean, what should landlords be thinking about, do you think, right now?
Well, you have to, I mean, look, landlords now, unfortunately, landlords have short memories. You get an interest you're getting mortgages for 1.5% locked in for 3, 5, 10 years. I mean, it's just ludicrous, right? People have short memories with regard to interest rates. Rents are continually going up. I spoke to a lettings director of one of the biggest agencies in London, and they're having 11 applicants to one property. Demand is really, really strong. What should landlords think about if they are thinking about automation? If they are thinking about, increasing their portfolio, they do need to think about automation. They need to be thinking about having the right suppliers. They need to be really conscious of tax and building their stress testing with regard to tax. Capital gains tax, how's that going to change in the future? I think it is more importantly, and that's why I wrote a book. I mean, this book was written 3 years ago. I've written 2 books called The Landlord's Friend, and actually, it's about putting a price on your time. Yeah, it's really important, and I think what landlords need to understand is tenants' expectations are now higher than ever before. They expect more out of a property, depending on what market you're on. I did a talk last week in Chatham to about 60 landlords, and I asked them, I said, how many of you have heard of build to rent, the industry build to rent? Only 2 landlords put their hands up. Big issue. I mean, I do lots of public speak, and I get booked to do lots of landlord events and train letting agents, all that. And build to rent is expanding. Tenants will pay more money if they get a better experience. So, we workspace, gyms, on-site security, faster broadband, cleaning, so all that type of stuff. Tenants will pay more money. And actually, if you're a landlord in an urban area and there is build to rent and there's a big development going up for 200, 150 flats or whatever, that's 150 lets as a competition against you. So landlords need to be wise about what's going on around them in the marketplace, without a doubt. And actually, they need to make sure that their properties really stand out and have good levels of communication with the tenant, and literally just having the mindset now of treating them as customers, because unfortunately landlords have had it good for a long time, and there is a lot of complaints about the government do this and the government do that. But literally, I mean, I was on a radio station yesterday called Talk Radio, and I was speaking to Ian Collins about this. We were talking about landlords and whatever, and actually landlords are housing providers now. That's how they have to look at themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of landlords are ashamed of being called landlords, which is a real shame, really. But that's been ignited by the press, and that came to the fore a lot with regard to COVID and the eviction ban and all that. I mean, we saw record amount of rent arrears at Landlord Action hitting over 12 months. We're seeing a big rise in our debt recovery service, where a lot of landlords are going after it and stuff. But there are smaller landlords actually in the marketplace. But generally, income-wise, investment-wise, it's been good for a lot of landlords that have had properties for a while. Harder now for landlords to get in the marketplace, because trying to get those genuine below market value deals at 15-20% below market value is tough. It is. It's really, really tough. So,
but you also, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head that the demand is still growing. I mean, the rental, there's more renters now than there's ever been. And a lot of people are saying that's because they have to rent and they can't afford it. But actually, there's a lot of people that choose to rent. Your point about that sort of the lifestyle, there's a lot of good I've been a tenant myself. I've been a landlord. And I love the convenience of being a tenant. So I think it can, I think it's a service that people will continue to want, and they want that flexibility. More people are moving around now, so they don't necessarily want to be stuck in one area. They want the flexibility to move and maybe even go abroad and stuff like that. So that's continued to, so I think it's such a vital thing that we get right. And I agree that there should be the compliance and everything else to make sure that properties are safe, but at the same time we do need to encourage people to be landlords, because it's such an important role to fill to meet the demand. I mean, how do you think how are we going to cope with that, you think, in the future?
Well, I think, I mean, house building wise, I think last year there was about 250,000 units built in London, which was quite encouraging. But obviously, every government says about, continuing house building and stuff, and the developers are now going to be hit with obviously the cladding costs as well. What's happened obviously obviously post Grenfell, that's going to have an impact. But I mean, the house builders have made absolute fortunes in recent years because demand. I mean, and obviously you look at some of the high streets. If you think what happened in COVID, early on, I was doing every day. I was doing a webinar. I was doing a Zoom like this, an engagement piece in the 3 lockdowns. And if you look at the private rental sector, the student market got battered. The guaranteed rent-to-rent market got battered as well. You had a lot of HMOs, landlords that got affected when they had a lot of foreign nationals that were going back home before the lockdown. All that type of stuff. They had a big issue with regard to unlawful evictions being carried out by landlords, changing locks. Then you also had mental health issues. So that was happening to Resi, but actually, if you look at the commercial property market, that got absolutely slaughtered. And now that under the permitted development laws, you are seeing some conversions from commercial to Resi, and there'll be a lot more of that happening. And I think also, some high streets will change as well. I'm talking about, smaller towns and stuff. You'll see a lot more Resi happening in town centres.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So we've been working, Alphaletz have been working a lot with Landlords recently, which has been great. And we've had a massive amount of new people signing up to us, which is great, thanks to the work we're doing with you guys. Can you tell us a bit about Landlord Zone and what you guys are doing and what you can offer, why landlords should sign up with you guys?
Yeah, so Landlord Zone, so my job as Chief Commercial Officer at Hamilton Fraser, I came to Hamilton Fraser in 2017 when I sold Landlord Action to Hamilton Fraser. And as Chief Commercial Officer, obviously I look and oversee sales, I do media engagement, but we own loads of different brands. So our most well-known brand, what people know would be My Deposits. We own the Property Redress Scheme, Client Money Protect. They're free government-backed schemes that are mandatory within the private rental sector. Our core business is Total Landlord Insurance. PI. We started deposit replacement called Own. We set up we set up 4 businesses, believe it or not, in lockdown. We set up HF Assist, a letting agent advice, and mortgage brokers called Total Landlord Mortgages. But in Landlord Zone, we bought that in 2018. I oversee Landlord Zone, and we've got a brilliant editor called Nigel Lewis, who's very esteemed in the industry. He writes for The Negotiator as well. And our focus was to have a breaking news website for landlords. So we break, literally every day we break news, 3 to 5 breaking stories a day. We've elevated the content as well. We have a forum, which is phenomenal, the amount of people that go on our forum. So it's a really well-known, trusted brand as in Landlord Zone engagement-wise. And we work with a lot of technology companies, a bit like yourself. We look at offering solution and, more importantly, education to landlords. And it's totally free, so it's not membership. You don't have to pay anything.
That's nice.
People can just subscribe to it to get the breaking news, to keep up to speed what's happening in industry, hear thoughts, from people like myself. We write a lot of blogs. We got a section called Landlord Voice, which is basically where we have landlords, we have people in the industry. We write blogs in a landlord's voice. So so we do engagement.
I've worked with Nigel as well. Nigel's been great. He's done a couple of reviews on us, did some nice write-ups, so that was great, and helping us get our name out to market. Fabulous. So no, that's great. I think the partnership's working great. I really appreciate you spending a few minutes with me today. Pleasure. I think we'll get this out onto our social media channels so people can get an overview and a bit more information, background on Landlord Zone and Alphaletz together. Yeah, we'll share it as well, Richard. That'd be fantastic. So thank you very much for that, and pleasure. All the best, and we'll speak again very soon. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Take care.